Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie, Part 14. Why did Gabby stay? Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. I have explained in other videos in this series that as a consequence of my review of a considerable amount of evidence, I formed the clear view that Brian Laundrie is a narcissist. As a consequence of that, this enables us to view all of his behaviours, actions, responses, the things that he says, the things that he does, through the prism of narcissism, to enable you to understand more. You know from earlier parts, I have selected news reports that have provided details about certain instances, the argument in the restaurant that took place, the apparent sighting of him in interaction in a bar, so that you understand more about why he behaves in the way that he does. But for the moment, let's turn our focus away from Brian Laundrie. Let's look at Gabby Petito. Her remains have been found. We have seen video footage of her, primarily from the two body cam videos, one of which I have already analysed, the second will be analysed presently. We saw that she presented as a distressed, anxious individual who was blaming herself for certain issues between herself and her fiancé. There is also considerable footage on social media, posted by her on YouTube, Instagram, etc., showing the journey that she was undertaking with Mr. Laundrie. There are those that have attempted to suggest that she is the abuser. That is clear nonsense. It's absolutely asinine, rebarbative horseshit. The way that she responded was what is known as reactive abuse. Believe me, I've seen it many times. It is important to understand that all non-narcissists are a bundle of empathic and narcissistic traits. I categorize people for the purposes of understanding narcissism essentially into four groups: the narcissists, my group, narcissistic people, normals, and the empaths. Gabby Petito falls within the empath category. And this means that she had a bundle of both empathic and narcissistic traits. What we do know that by virtue of being an empath, which is evidenced from the information that is out there in the public domain, that her empathic traits ordinarily kept her narcissistic traits in check. This doesn't mean that she's some kind of saint or angel. It means that most of the time, her narcissistic trait of pride, for example, is kept in check by her emotional empathy and the empathic traits, so that her narcissistic trait of pride, or other ones, operates in what would be deemed as a healthy manner. So, for example, one can see that she took pride in her appearance, that she was slim, that she wore makeup, that she wore nice clothes. She may well have worked out or is just the benefit of a young metabolism. But let's say, for example, that she took pride in her appearance, which meant that she wore makeup, bought nice clothes, not necessarily expensive ones, that she had the usual potions and lotions that people do, that she worked out in order to stay trim. That is a healthy manifestation of her narcissistic trait of pride. Were she a narcissist, then there would be no empathic traits to keep that narcissistic trait in check, and instead she might have, for example, stolen other people's money to pay for makeup, for those potions and lotions. She may well have spent a lot of time down the gym, abrogating other responsibilities and obligations that she had. She might borrow people's clothes and cause them to be ripped or marked and not care about it. And that is an unhealthy manifestation of the narcissistic trait of pride. She is a bundle of both empathic and narcissistic traits. The other aspect of the fact that she is an empath is she has what is known as the addiction. And this is central to the understanding as to why did Gabby Petito stay with Brian Laundrie. I've explained elsewhere that it's very clear from the evidence as presented that she was in the sustained devaluation. When somebody becomes the intimate partner primary source of a narcissist, this means spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, cohabitee, they follow a certain trajectory in the relationship. To begin with, there is the seduction, where you're drawn in. We give you the golden period. You are painted white. Everything about you is wonderful, so we treat you well. The level of the treatment varies dependent on the type of narcissist. Some people get the whole shebang. Lots of gifts, lots of compliments, mind-blowing sex, lots of supportive behaviour, seen as a really good and interesting person who takes a lot of interest in the victim. And all of this is done, driven by the narcissism, in order to ensnare that individual. You then become embedded as the intimate partner primary source, and you remain in the golden period, all is well. But thereafter, the golden period will end, and it always ends. You enter into what is known as a sustained devaluation, where basically we have become bored of you. Either your fuel, which is the emotional responses that you provide to us, which provides us with validation and basically fuels us, powers us, becomes stale, or you're not providing it as often enough and as large amounts enough, so it doesn't become stale, but nevertheless that threatens our control. And therefore our narcissism shifts to treating you badly. And you'll be familiar with the whole range of manipulations that occurs. Gabby Petito found herself in that situation. She and Brian Laundrie had been in a relationship of a number of years, and therefore the golden period, because it invariably only lasts between 6 months to 18 months, sometimes less, sometimes longer, but those are the average amounts, she will have moved into the sustained devaluation. It was evident as a consequence of what she was talking about and other evidence that has come to the fore. Because she was in that sustained devaluation, you might ask yourself, why then didn't she go? It was evident that he was treating her badly. And, as I've explained previously, it's clear that she would have been subjected to a repeated range of behaviours, whereby she was told that she was crazy, that she had OCD. She was probably hit on a repeated basis, made to cry, told that she was a nutcase. He will have probably withdrawn affection and sex from her. He'll have insulted her, given her a word salad, triangulated her, for instance, as I've explained in Trapped, how he triangulated her with the vehicle. He'll have triangulated her with money. He will have done a whole range of different manipulations driven by his unconscious narcissism, which did that in order to enable him to assert control over her, draw fuel from her, draw character traits from her, and residual benefits, the 4 pieces of the 4 prime aims. Many of you who've commented scratch your heads and think, okay, so he was treating her really badly, why did she not get out? Many of you, of course, who've been involved in the relationship with a narcissist understand how difficult that can be. It's not necessarily because the narcissist chains you to a radiator so you can't physically escape, but moreover it's a combination of 2 things. 1, the nature of the manipulations that the narcissist will use, the push and pull, where we give you the sustained devaluation, and then we give you a respite period where the golden period is reinstated and everything's all right again, and we return to that person that you fell in love with. The charming, kind, fun, interesting, considerate individual, and that's what you want. And of course, what you don't realise is that that is an illusion, that is an artifice, and instead you think that you've got back what you had in the beginning, so invariably you stay. And then when it goes wrong again, rather than think, it's happened again, I'm out, you do your utmost to get back to that golden period because you've been able to get back to it before. The problem is, what victims don't realise is, you don't cause the golden period, we do. Either consciously, where an aware narcissist such as myself, or for the majority of narcissists it's done unconsciously. You think that you've done something which has caused the narcissist to like and love you once again, to treat you well. You haven't. It's essentially the narcissism selects this as the best means of controlling you. Often, for instance, if there's a risk of you departing the relationship. Accordingly, you get sucked back in. The narcissist might say sorry, which is false contrition. The narcissist may make overtures about changing, but of course nothing fundamental or permanent does happen with regard to change. Why? Because the narcissist is incapable of sustained and permanent change. It is transitory in nature, purely to get what we require. Accordingly, the narcissist's own behaviour will, of course, result in the victim remaining in the relationship. And often it's because we give you the good stuff once again, and you're conned into thinking, goody gumdrops, I've been able to get the relationship back on a stable footing. I really love this person, let's keep this going. And when it goes wrong again, you're conned into thinking, well, I've done it once, I can do it again. Of course, some individuals end up staying out of fear. Fear of what might happen if they try to leave. Fear if they do something wrong. Physical violence plays a considerable part in this. And fear is seized upon by the emotional thinking of the victim also to keep them in situ. Part of the reason why Gabby stayed will have been as a consequence of the behaviours of Brian Laundrie. In some instances, she was frightened of departing because of the way that he was treating her. In other instances, she didn't want to go because he reinstated the good stuff through the respite golden periods, and therefore she thought we're back on an even footing again. The fundamental reason why she didn't go is because of her own addiction to narcissists. It's quite clear that Gabby Petito has in fact been primed to be a victim of narcissistic abuse in a romantic sense, because it was already something that she's encountered in a familial environment. And that's something I will return to on another occasion. She has an addiction which has formed within her, and if you'd like to understand more about precisely where that comes from and why, if you go in my knowledge vault, details in the video description, and obtain the foundation, emotional thinking, the addiction, the foundation, that material will explain to you where it comes from in detail. This has been forged with Gabby Petito, and that addiction sits at the heart of her and wants her to continue to have interactions with narcissists. Not just Brian Laundrie, but any of the narcissists that happen to come by. Of course, chiefly, her addiction wants to be fed by Brian Laundrie because they're in a relationship. So it wants her having physical time with him, having sex, going for a walk on the beach. It wants them communicating. It wants her doing things for and in relation to him. It wants her talking about him with other people and, of course, thinking about him. Because if she does any of those 5 things, she feeds the addiction. So her emotional thinking cons her into remaining in the relationship. Many people would say, as soon as a guy hits me, I'm out. As soon as a guy treats me that way, I'm out. As soon as a woman starts to abuse me, I'm out of the relationship. And there are those that will walk. And those that do are the normals. Why? They don't have the addiction. They don't have something which basically fogs their brains, colours their thinking. And those are the individuals which find it easier to walk away from a relationship. And if you want to understand more about the different categorizations, particularly including normals, go to the Knowledge Vault and obtain Understanding Emotional Empathy, the difference between empaths, normals, and narcissists. There is a lot that I can tell you about emotional thinking because it's a vast topic. But for the purposes of this part of the Petito series, it's enough for you to understand that the addiction generates emotional thinking so that it fogs the mind of the victim. Emotional thinking poses a triple threat, and I'd invite you to find my video, The Triple Threat Posed by Emotional Thinking, so you can find more detail about that to help yourself. Basically, the victim takes leave of their senses. So take, for example, when a victim is being love-bombed by a narcissist. This is during the seduction. And so one particular narcissist might be sending text messages, 50, 100 each day, complimentary, flattery, fun. Talking to the victim 3, 4, 5 hours every single night. Buying the victim gifts. Talking about marriage or saying that they love the victim, even though they've only been dating for 3 weeks. All of those are red flags. What do they demonstrate? a lack of boundary recognition, monopolization of time, operating with a sense of entitlement, evidencing a lack of accountability for behaviours, evidencing a lack of emotional empathy for the victim. All of these things are being caused by the narcissism to make the narcissist ensnare that victim. Now, there are some victims who would say, whoa, this guy is coming on a bit strong. I'm out of here. It's too much. And they break off the dating. Those will be normals. An empath won't do it. Why? Because already their addiction is being fed so strongly that the emotional thinking is off the charts. And that person doesn't see the 50 to 100 texts a day as intrusive and monopolizing their time. They see it as cute and he's really into me. They don't see the fact that he's bought 4 gifts in the space of 2 weeks as out of place. It's not the victim's birthday or Christmas and they haven't done anything else that would merit purchasing a gift. They just think that he's being sweet. They don't see it as actually a form of bribery. They don't think anything untoward of the fact that they speak for 4 or 5 hours every single night, so they've started missing appointments with friends, not doing the things that they ordinarily do, perhaps go down the gym or watch television, in order to spend time speaking on the telephone. They don't see this as intrusive or a monopolization of their time, and a lack of a boundary recognition. They see it as, we just get on so well, we've so much in common, I love talking to them. It's already too late for this particular victim, and this is when the good stuff is being layered on. The emotional thinking basically causes the victim to take leave of their senses so they don't see what it actually is. Friends and family might, and they might try and warn that person. I think he's coming on a bit strong. Think about Prince William when he spoke to Prince Harry, telling him to take his time with the relationship. William didn't realise that Harry's wife was a narcissist. What he recognised, though, that it was going far too quick, far too soon. And those are red flags. The emotional thinking not only appears, of course, during seduction. For Gabby Petito, it also appeared while she was being devalued, and the malign behaviours came out. Rather than her think, hang on a second, I've not done anything wrong, I'm trying to work on my blog, and he's losing his temper at me, that's out of order, I'm not putting up with this. She did the classic thing that is caused by emotional thinking. She either blamed Laundrie's behaviour on something else, he's tired, he's stressed, he's had a tough day, his feet are dirty, or, more commonly, in conjunction with the self-flagellation that was all too apparent with a victim of a narcissist that is an empath, she blamed herself. I'm spending too much time on my work, I'm not spending enough time with him. Maybe I have become a little bit obsessed with it. I need to pipe down. Perhaps I tore a strip off him earlier on when we were arguing. I feel bad about it. I've seen it many, many times, not only in terms of those that I've dealt with, but also those that I advise, where they blame themselves. Rather than realise that they're being abused, rather than realise that the behaviour towards them is unpleasant and unfounded, driven by their emotional thinking so they can't see clearly, the victim blames themselves. They believe that they have somehow caused it. And of course, the narcissist is going to reinforce that. You made me have an affair. You made me hit you. If you didn't spend so much time with your head in the computer, it wouldn't upset me. So it's a combination of the self-flagellation of the empath, driven by their emotional thinking caused by the addiction, and the narcissist seizing on this to reinforce it by virtue of the assertion of control through blame shifting, provocation, belittlement, invalidation, insult, and so forth. Gabby Petito stayed, notwithstanding the fact that she was being repeatedly abused, because Brian Laundrie's manipulations kept her in situ, and her own emotional thinking did not let her see clearly what it was. She wanted everything to be all right, because as an empath she has a desire to heal and fix. She wants the problems in the relationship to be mended rather than walk away from it. Indeed, empaths typically think that walking away from the relationship isn't something that they should do, that they should work harder. That they think to themselves, well, isn't it the case that every relationship has its ups and downs, and we have to work through them? Ups and downs does not include being abused. There are those, of course, who are married. It wasn't the case with Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie, but they were engaged to be married. And there are those that think, well, I gave my vows. I said for better or worse. What they fail to understand is that when that is said, it means with regard to the external world, that you and your spouse will stick together, shoulder to shoulder, to take on the problems that the world throws at you. Somebody losing their job, somebody being bereaved, one of you falling ill. It doesn't mean that you consent for worse within your relationship in terms of being treated badly and being abused. But again, many people fail to understand that, and driven by their own emotional thinking, which corrupts certain of their traits, they remain locked into the relationship and they don't leave. People talk about trauma bonding. Trauma bonding is actually just one manifestation of the addiction. It's part of what it is. The addiction is powerful. I deal with people on a near daily basis, seeking my advice about how to deal with it. And I coach them with a very effective material to help them drive down that emotional thinking, to enable them to move forward and achieve freedom, to enable them to embrace logic rather than being misled by emotional thinking. Gabby Petito was misled by her own emotional thinking. She was kept in place by the manipulations. In all likelihood, Laundrie would have threatened her in certain things. If you go, I'll do this. There will also have been pity plays, given his status of the type of narcissist that he is. Please don't leave me. I don't know what I'll do without you. I'm sorry, it won't happen again. You just made me lose my temper. I guess it's all just a bit stressful because we're in this van together, etc., etc. And she falls for it because she doesn't know what, and she didn't know what she was dealing with. Added to that, she has the problem of her own emotional thinking. Laundrie was the enemy without. Her emotional thinking was the enemy within. It didn't want her ending the relationship. It didn't want her walking away. It tried as hard as it possibly could to keep her in place. And so when Brian Laundrie started to devalue her, whatever time that was, months, maybe even years ago, rather than think, this guy has changed and he's treating me badly, I'm out, her emotional thinking caused her to think, I should do more to salvage this relationship. He has his good points. He's not bad all of the time. Well, of course we're not. If we were red and tooth of claw all of the time, we wouldn't get any victims. If I walked into a bar and saw an attractive lady and sat beside her and said, hello, my name's H.G. Tudor. I'm a narcissistic psychopath. How would you like to be abused to within an inch of your life? She'd in all likelihood scream, throw her dirty martini over me, and run away. I've just lost control of her. Therefore, I would not do that. I, as an aware narcissist, would not select that course of action. Similarly, an unaware narcissist, their narcissism would not allow them to behave in that way. We have to appear as kind and interesting and fun and mirroring the things that you like to draw you to us. When she became devalued, her emotional thinking was off the charts because she was involved on such a repeated and daily basis with Brian Laundrie. She was in those 5 arenas of interaction that I mentioned earlier, which kept her in place. She couldn't, in fact, see straight. She couldn't think straight. Not only was she being ground down by his dizzying manipulations, but the fact is her own emotional thinking was working against her. She knew she was upset. She knew that she felt miserable. She knew that she felt sad, frightened, anxious. But it wasn't enough to cause her to leave because of that pincer movement of his manipulations and her own emotional thinking. Many people who don't understand narcissism judge and stand there and say, well, why didn't she just get out? Well, of course. From the sidelines, for those unaffected by the relationship themselves and often unaffected by emotional thinking, it looks like that's all too easy. However, once you understand about narcissism and the dynamic between narcissist and victim, and what it is about the victim that meant that they were ensnared in the first place, it's also why they stay ensnared. That is why we instinctively, or calculatedly, by an aware narcissist, choose empaths as our primary victims. Yes, we can have anybody as a victim, a normal, a narcissistic person, or a narcissist, but invariably we will choose empaths to be the most important victims, namely our intimate partner primary sources, because they're our easiest to get ensnared and They are the easiest to keep ensnared. They cater to the prime aims better than anybody else, and we can control them because of the inherent emotional thinking that empathic victim has, which means that at the first sign of trouble they don't bail, but instead they remain within the relationship, self-flagellating themselves, working hard to try and correct the problems, blaming themselves. You saw from the body cam footage how Gabby Petito blamed herself. She blamed herself because he made her think that she was the problem, because his narcissism would not allow him to ever accept accountability or the blame. And her own emotional thinking told her that she was at fault in order to con her to remaining in the relationship with Laundrie, so her addiction was fed. Why did Gabby stay? 2 reasons. The manipulations of Brian Laundrie and her own emotional thinking. If you find yourself in a relationship with a narcissist at the current time, or you know somebody that is, and you want assistance with regard to the escape and thereafter remaining out, indeed applying what I have coined the function of GOSO, get out and stay out, use my material. Listen to my videos. I have hundreds of them outside of this series. Read my blog articles at narcsite.com, link in the video description. Use the extensive material in the Knowledge Vault, and you of course can book a consultation with me so that you can have my delinquent mind assist you, my expertise applied to your own situation to enable you to achieve that freedom. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.